Hey guys, tonight we tumble back into ancient Rome not to admire the marble temples or watch gladiators clash, but to visit a place you'd probably rather skip, the neighborhood laundry. Or, as the Romans called it, the Fullonica. It's wet, it's smelly, and yes, it involves an uncomfortable amount of other people's bodily fluids. You're not watching this from the sidelines either. You're in it. Right now, you're standing in the middle of a cramped, stone-walled room. Its floor, slick with something you pray isn't what you think it is. Steam clings to your skin. The air is so sharp with ammonia, your eyes sting just trying to blink. You take a breath in. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your first job? Welcome to the toga pit. You're a new hire at the Fullonica of Stephanus, a real business in ancient Pompeii, and you've been handed your tools. A tunic that was white, maybe for wash cycles ago, and your own 2 feet. That's right. In a world before detergent, softener, or even decent footwear, laundry was a full-body, foot-powered affair. You trudge forward and peer into the first vat. It's a wide, low basin made of stone, its sides crusted with mineral stains. You recognize a familiar color and texture swirling inside pale yellow with a thick froth. You ask what's in it, hoping for herbal solution or citrus soak. The answer: human urine, mostly collected from nearby public urinals. Don't worry, you're not alone in your disbelief. Historians were puzzled for decades until chemical analysis confirmed Etruscan launderers really did use urine as their main cleaning agent. Why? Because urine contains ammonia, a powerful compound that breaks down oils and organic stains. In short, your ancestors invented a pee-powered degreaser. Effective. Yes. Appealing. Not in the slightest. You're nudged forward by a man with arms like boiled hams and a nose so reddened it looks sunburned from the inside. In you go, he grunts. You step in, toes sinking into the warm, slick mix. Your instinct is to recoil, but too late. Your feet are already doing a dance called the fulling shuffle. You stomp, twist, grind. It's like grape stomping. If the grapes had been left out for 2 weeks in the Roman sun. One mainstream fact: these places weren't rare. Fullonica were scattered all across the Roman Empire, from Spain to Syria. Every Roman town needed at least one, usually many, and they were often loud, hot, and tucked into the busiest city corners, where their smell could drift right into your midday stroll. A fringe tidbit: some foolers actually sang while stomping, not out of joy, but as a form of timing their work. Songs helped them keep pace. Imagine a sea shanty, but in Latin, and sung by guys knee in fermented sweat. There's still debate among scholars about just how socially acceptable these places were. Some argue foolers had a respected role after all. They dealt with high-status clothing. Others say they were looked down on, lumped in with butchers and tanners as part of the city's dirty class. You decide pretty quickly which side your nose agrees with. As you slosh your way through another bundle of tunics, you notice something else, not just from the crowded room, but from the actual water. That's because some Fullonica heated their vats using charcoal pits below. Laundry wasn't just disgusting, it was potentially dangerous, with open flames licking beneath tubs of volatile, stinking liquid. You lose track of time. Someone tosses another batch of clothing your way, and you learn, very quickly, how heavy soaked wool becomes. Romans wore a lot of wool, which absorbs water like a grudge. You pull it out, wring it, and toss it into the next station. Don't expect a fresh mountain stream. The rinse basin is slightly less yellow, slightly less warm, and filled with clothing just as suspicious as yours. Still, you're grateful for the change. You slosh your arms around, fighting against the slippery feel of something that might be ancient oil or might be worse. And here's the kicker: these clothes aren't even yours. They belong to senators, merchants, and temple priests. You're literally washing the laundry of the 1%. Meanwhile, you're inhaling enough ammonia to pickle a cabbage, and you haven't even seen the drying yard yet. But that's a nightmare for another hour. For now, you're ankle deep in a technique that actually worked. Disgusting, ancient, effective, and as your toes wrinkle and your lungs adjust to the funk, you'll realize something disturbing. You might just be getting used to it. You know how we talked about the vats you stepped into? Yeah, let's zoom in on that, because the real star of the Roman laundry world, the secret sauce, if you will, wasn't fancy technique or clean water. It was pee. Human pee. Buckets of it. Pots full of it. Entire street corners dedicated to collecting it. And tonight, you're not just stepping into it. You're understanding why, in ancient Rome, urine was the most valuable thing no one wanted to talk about. You're back at the Fullonica, standing at the edge of a fresh vat. It's been newly topped up, and the warmth coming off it isn't just from the afternoon sun. One of your co-workers, a boy barely old enough to shave cheerfully, informs you that this morning's batch came from the amphitheater crowd after a gladiator fight. He says it with pride, like he's describing a fine vintage. You're stunned? You ask again just to be sure. And yep, you heard right. Romans didn't just use any water to clean their clothes. They sought out urine because of its ammonia content. And while we now understand the science behind it, back then, they just knew it got the stains out. Oil, grease, sweat pee, cut through it all like magic. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Roman state actually institutionalized pee collection. They had jars set up at public urinals, called piss pots, and people were encouraged to relieve themselves there, rather than in alleyways or streets. It was all part of a system, a gross, genius system. What made it even weirder? The tax, yep. Emperor Vespasian in the 1st century CE taxed urine. The collectors of on enslaved or very low status, laborers had to pay a fee to retrieve public urine, which they would then sell to foolers like you. Vespasian's son, Titus, reportedly made a face when he learned about this. In response, the emperor held up a coin and asked, "Does it smell? No. Then money's money." You can't help but laugh, or maybe cry, as you dump another bucket of fresh liquid gold into the vat. You try not to think about the guy who delivered it, or what he had for dinner. You just stir, because that's your job. Quirky tidbit time. Wealthy Romans even had chamber pots indoors that their slaves would empty into larger collection barrels, so the richer the neighborhood, the better the pee. Think about that next time someone brags about their zip code. Historians still argue whether the Romans fully understood the chemistry behind it, or if they just trusted generations of tradition. Some believe it was trial and error genius. Someone noticed that clothes soaked in stale urine came out cleaner, and the practice stuck. Others think they noticed animal behavior, like how dogs used pee to clean fur and mimicked it. There's no consensus, only the lingering smell of curiosity. And while you stir the pungent mix with a long wooden paddle, you spot a special ingredient being added: pumice powder, crushed volcanic rock, slightly abrasive, mixed into the pee like a scrub. It adds just enough grit to loosen dirt from the fabric fibers. Now it's less of a soup and more of a sloshy exfoliating facial for your toga. You see another fooler beside you reach in. "The smooth leaves after a while," he says. You're not convinced, but you also don't have gloves. By midday, the whole Fullonica smells like a cross between a stable and a broken toilet. And still the clients keep coming. Senators, merchants, even temple priests, they drop off their finest wool garments here because they know it works. Reputation matters, and no one wants to be seen with sweat stains or olive oil spots down their back. One older man brings in a robe streaked with wine. He claims it was from a Bacchus festival. Judging by the smell, it might also be from last month. He smiles at you and slips a coin to your overseer, whispering something about extra rinse. You wonder how many bribes a day pass through this place. How much of that coin traces back to a street corner pot filled in the dark of night. And how, somehow, this whole system, gross, gritty, and absolutely unthinkable by today's standards, actually kept Roman society looking sharp. You're elbow deep in ancient urine chemistry, and somehow, it's working. You're barely out of your second vat when the real workout begins. A gruff voice calls your name, well, not your actual name, more like a nickname that loosely translates to new meat, and gestures toward the largest basin in the Fullonica. You step over a puddle that may or may not be alive and peer inside. It's filled with what looks like a soggy wool avalanche. This is the stomped vat, the heart of the process. The Roman version of a spin cycle. If the spin cycle involved you doing a strange, exhausting dance with your legs until they go numb. The technique, simple. Strip off your sandals, climb in, and begin stomping. Not casually, rhythmically. You're not just moving laundry around. You're kneading, pressing, and grinding it against the stone floor to scrub out every last speck of dirt and oil. It's a workout, a ritual, and frankly, a punishment all rolled into one. Your knees ache in protest. Your ankles keep slipping, and your nose, your poor, overworked nose, is staging a rebellion. The sourness of the pee has mixed with the wool's natural funk, creating a sort of steamy sock soup. A few other foolers are stomping next to you, their faces blank, eyes unfocused, lost in a trance only exhaustion can summon. Here's a mainstream fact for you. Roman foolers did this for hours. Not just once per garment either. Clothing could go through multiple rounds of stomping, soaking, and rinsing depending on how fancy the customer was or how filthy the tunic had become. This wasn't lazy work, it was a full-body experience. You find yourself falling into rhythm with the guy to your left, a seasoned stomper who hums a repetitive tune. His voice is low, almost a drone, but it keeps the pace. You join in, softly at first. The melody doesn't matter, it's the beat. Stomp, shift, stomp, twist, over and over. A laundry dance of doom. Quirky tidbit. Ancient graffiti discovered in Pompeii shows cartoonish drawings of foolers with oversized feet and clouds of stink coming off their heads. It seems even back then, the locals had jokes about the foot-stomping laundry crew. You wonder if your current expression is meme-worthy. Now, not all of Rome's laundry facilities use the human treadmill method. Some historians think wealthier operations may have experimented with animals to agitate the vats, or developed early pulley systems, but there's no solid evidence they ever replaced the human touch of foot. Still, scholars continue to debate the details. Did foolers work in shifts to avoid fatigue, or did they stomp until collapse, and rotate only when one of them face planted into the wool? There's no clear answer, just fragment styles worn, smoothed by feet, tools found in drains, and accounts from wealthy Romans who never did a day of this work themselves. After an hour, your feet are numb. Your calves scream, you smell like boiled feet, and your brain is starting to buzz from the heat and ammonia fumes. Someone nearby coughs, and you catch a splash of something that probably wasn't water. You take a break if you can call crouching next to a drain with a ladle of barely cool water a break. Your overseer tosses you a dried fig. No lunch breaks here, just snacks between. You look around at the others. Each one has the same stooped posture, the same swollen ankles, the same resigned stare. These aren't slaves. You realize some are poor citizens trying to earn a few coins. Others are apprentice children. Some are lifers, men who've stomped their way through decades of other people's tunics and somehow lived to tell the tale. The vat now resembles a thick stew, foamy and gray. The garments have softened, their original colors starting to peek through beneath the film. You wring out a toga, and the rinse water dribbles down your arms. You don't bother wiping it off anymore. You'll do this again tomorrow, and the day after. And somehow, you're not even the worst off here. One guy across the room has trench foot. Another lost a toenail. You don't ask how. There are some Fullonica secrets you don't want to know. As the sun starts to slide down, casting long shadows over the damp stone floor, you wring out one last tunic and toss it to the next station. You climb out, legs trembling, and try not to slip on the slick tile. You swear the vat winks at you as if to say, "See you tomorrow, friend," and you know you will, because until the Romans invent dry cleaning, this disgusting dance is here to stay. So, your feet are pruned, your legs feel like wet rope, and you're wondering, did the Romans seriously do all this without soap? Short answer, yep. Long answer, they didn't even know what soap really was, at least. Not in the bubbly, lather dash, it dash, up dash, and dash, rinse, dash it dash, off way we do. The average Roman fooler would squint at a bar of Dove and probably assume it was some sort of ceremonial cheese. What they had instead was a clever, if slightly insane, cocktail of natural substitutes. Once the stomping phase was done, garments moved to the scouring stage, a kind of ancient deep cleaning spa treatment. Picture a gritty massage. If massages involved scrubbing fabric with abrasive dust and volcanic leftovers, you grab a sack of powdered clay, specifically fuller's earth, a naturally absorbent material mined from the countryside. It's soft, grayish, and looks innocent enough. But once you start rubbing it into a wool tunic that just spent 3 hours marinating in foot juice, you realize this stuff means business. It pulls out oils, and even smells marginally better than everything else in the room. Next up, ashes. Yep, you sprinkle some into a bowl, mix it with a bit of water, and lime. A primitive alkaline cleaner that, when combined with a little elbow grease and unfortunate optimism, actually helps break down leftover gunk. You're basically making laundry alchemy in real time. Mainstream fact. The Romans knew these materials worked, but they didn't fully understand why. They relied on generations of trial and error. Recipes were passed down not in books, but through training and habit. There were no instructions, only a stern glance from your overseer if you mixed the wrong ratio of ash to water. A fun, fringe tidbit. Some foolers added crushed animal bones or ground up seashells to their scouring mixes. The idea was to create extra grit for scrubbing. No one's quite sure if it worked or just made things worse. But hey, if your tunic comes back with a slight crunch, it's probably authentic. Now, you're hunched over a wide, waist-high stone counter, rubbing a stiff tunic like it owes you money. Your hands are raw. Their clay has dried into the creases of your knuckles, and there's ash under your nails. Someone passes you a rag dampened with vinegar to cut the smell, but it mostly makes your eyes sting. You begin to understand why Roman clothing was such a statement. The brighter, whiter, and cleaner your tunic, the more effort or coin someone had poured into getting it that way. You're elbow deep in that effort right now. Historians still argue about the exact order and mix of these materials. Some believe clay came first, then urine soaking, then ash scrubbing. Others claim it depended on the stain. Olive oil versus blood required different sequences. The truth is, no single Roman recipe survived. We piece it together from remnants, graffiti, and inscriptions carved into laundry workshop walls. One Pompeii Fullonica even had instructional murals, and you can't help but chuckle, because even 2,000 years ago, people needed laundry tutorials. A fellow fuller walks past and slaps a chunk of something onto your table. You blink. It looks like a soggy sponge. He grins. Goat fat and ash, he says proudly. Makes the whites whiter. You ask how he knows. He taps his nose. My mother was a fuller. Her whites could blind the emperor. You stare at the sponge, decide not to ask further questions, and start rubbing. By the end of the shift, your hands are calloused. Your arms ache. And your respect for modern washing machines has reached religious levels. But the tunics, they're visibly cleaner, not just less stained, brighter, and somehow, despite using zero soap, zero softener, and zero sense of personal dignity, you've actually helped make someone's clothes look good. As you line up the garments for final rinsing, you realize the weirdest truth of all. It works. This chaotic blend of mud, ash, pee, and foot sweat works. It's disgusting, exhausting, and more than a little dangerous, but it does what it's supposed to. And that, more than anything else, is the essence of Roman practicality. Take what's available, mix it with something worse, and end up with something kind of amazing. You pat your hands on your tunic. Dust rises. You sneeze. The man next to you sneezes too, laughs, and says, "Ah," means it's clean. By now, you've accepted your fate. You're a professional stink handler. And while the job stinks literally, it's not just about stomping and scrubbing. It's about reputation. Meet the foolers, the real MVPs of Roman out. You think you're just some underpaid laundry lackey. But to the average Roman citizen, your work is a status symbol. Think of it this way. When someone steps out in a crisply whitened toga, the first thought isn't, "Wow, nice outfit." It's, "Wow, they can afford a good fuller." You and your crew are part of a class of workers who are oddly important and wildly disrespected at the same time. It's like being a celebrity dog groomer, but for senators, you're invisible until someone's robe comes back smelling like fish sauce. You've gotten to know your co-workers. There's Lucius, who's missing 3 fingers but still folds like a god. Junia, who can sniff a tunic and tell you what street it was worn on. And old Crassus, who claims he once washed the emperor's cup, though no one believes him. He also thinks the moon is a chariot wheel. So, mainstream fact. Foolers weren't just random laborers. They belonged to actual trade guilds associations that regulated the profession. In places like Ostia and Pompeii, foolers had their own buildings, political connections, and even religious shrines. That's right. Some Fullonica had dedicated altars to Minerva or Mercury, asking for guidance, protection, and possibly better air circulation. But let's not get too romantic. Despite the guilds, foolers weren't considered respectable by Rome's high society. Handling human waste, working with chemicals, and constantly reeking of fermented ammonia meant you weren't exactly dinner party material. Some Romans wouldn't even speak to a fuller directly. They'd send a slave to do the dirty talking. Your quirky tidbit. There was actually a common Roman insult that basically meant you smell like a fuller. It was used in plays, taverns, and probably shouted from balconies during arguments. One bit of graffiti in Pompeii reads, "Thessalus stinks worse than the fuller's vat." Rough. So here you are, in a job that's necessary, skilled, and secretly powerful, but still leaves you getting side-eyed at the bakery. It's a weird place to be. Historians still debate how much social mobility Fullers really had. Some evidence suggests they could amass wealth and even buy their freedom if enslaved. Others point out that their earnings were modest and their lives short, thanks to the constant exposure to chemicals and bacteria. One inscription praises a Fuller who died clean, which is either an ironic joke or a testament to impossible standards. Back at the workshop, you're handling a special order. A client wants his toga whitened extra bright for a wedding. You'd reach for the chalky white clay and a bottle of stale goat milk. Don't ask why. Just follow the recipe and get to work. Unia leans over and mutters, "Don't mess it up. He's a senator's cousin. Mess it up, and we'll be rinsing socks till Saturn returns." You nod solemnly and begin the careful process of bleaching. No bleach, of course, just sunlight, chalk, and a whole lot of hope. You spread the damp tunic over a flat rock outside and smear it with a thin layer of Fuller's earth. The goal: let the sun do the rest. It's the Roman version of a UV treatment with the added bonus of stray cats walking across your hard work. You look around and notice something surprising. Despite the grime, the stink, and the 17 different ways your skin is probably infected, there's a weird pride among the workers. They talk about their clients' habits, brag about the toughest stains they've beaten, and pass down techniques like family heirlooms. This one had fish sauce and pine resin. Lucius says, holding up a tunic, "Took me 3 soaks and half a lemon." You nod, impressed. He shrugs. "I used the senator's lemon. He'll never know." Even among the ranks of the underappreciated Fullers, take their crafts seriously, because when the job is this gross, your only reward is being good at it. And tonight, as you stack freshly dried garments for delivery, your hands cracked, your tunic 2 shades darker than it started, you feel it, that strange Roman blend of dignity and filth. You're a Fuller. You make Rome shine, and you reek like triumph. You'd think that after hours of stomping through vats of warm pee and rubbing tunics with ash paste, people would appreciate your efforts. But here's the twist: Roman laundry wasn't just about cleanliness. It was about status. You're holding a toga now, freshly stomped and sun-dried, with just a hint of volcanic ash clinging to the hem. It's bright, almost unnaturally so. You didn't make it look new. You made it look expensive. Because in ancient Rome, white wasn't just a color, it was a billboard. To understand why, you've got to step out of the Fullonica and walk through the forum. You spot a man in a dazzling white toga, worn by politicians trying to look pure, honest, and definitely not covered in bribes. The whiteness of his robe doesn't say, "I'm clean." It screams, "I have the money and servants to make me clean." It's laundry as social armor. Mainstream fact: Roman garments, especially wool ones, were tough to clean. Making them shine required hours of work, specialized materials, and most importantly, a team of skilled Fullers. The result: a visible marker of wealth. If your tunic was crusted with old stew, people assumed you were either poor or had insulted your Fuller. Now, here's your quirky tidbit. Some Fullers offered special whitening treatments for clients with public appearances. They'd even layer crushed chalk or white clay onto the surface of garments, so they looked brighter, just long enough to show a fan, then fall apart at the first sneeze. Basically, ancient Rome invented fast fashion back in the Fullonica. You've started noticing which garments get the extra treatment. That senator's cousin always wants a double soak. The baker's apprentice, he just wants his tunic not to smell like burnt flour and defeat. Historians still argue whether this obsession with clean clothes was cultural or political. Some say Romans saw cleanliness as divine, tied to religious purity. Others think it was more about optics, because let's be real, nothing says, "Trust me with your taxes," like a toga so bright it blinds people. You're now assigned to the whitening station, a sunlit yard where garments are carefully laid out and brushed with a slurry of chalk and Fuller's earth. You sit in the heat, applying the mixture with slow strokes while squinting through sweat. The mixture dries to a thin crust, which is later dusted off to leave a bright, matte finish. And while you're baking both tunic and face under the Roman sun, a messenger arrives. He's wearing sandals, worth more than your month's pay, and hands over a package with an actual seal. You open it carefully and find a robe with a stitched hem gold thread. Real gold. Unia gasps. "High priestess." You blink. Suddenly, the robe in your hands feels heavier, sacred, even. You ask what to do. She grins. "Scrub like your life depends on it," because it probably does. So you do. You mix your cleanest clay, use your softest brush, and double-check every fold. You don't even stomp at this one. Gets a hand massage in specially filtered urine. Talk about royal treatment. While scrubbing, you learn something else. Clothing had meaning. A white robe might signal piety. A richly dyed tunic marked wealth. A poorly cleaned toga, that meant disgrace. In a society without Instagram, your outfit was your personal branding. Later that afternoon, you overhear a dispute. A client claims his tunic came back less white than last time. Your overseer counters with a glare and a confidence. Your sins must have soaked in deeper. Everyone laughs except the client. Turns out, foolers weren't just cleaners. They were keepers of reputation. If a senator's toga looked shabby, the fooler might get blamed or, worse, get replaced. The pressure was very real, and it made every scrub a little more personal. You finish your shift, hands chalky, face flushed. You watch the stack of robes drying on the racks, glowing softly in the fading sunlight. The scent of ammonia is still in your nose, but you've learned to live with it, sort of. And as you walk home through the busy Roman street, your own tunic still damp and vaguely crunchy, you pass a group of men in bright white robes, laughing and sipping wine. One of them looks over just for a second and you wonder if he knows, if he realizes someone like you is the reason he can strut down the Via Sacra looking like Jupiter himself. You grin. Probably not. But that's fine. Let him glow. You're the reason he gets to. The next morning greets you not with a rooster's crow, but with the metallic clink of a chamber pot being dumped into a clay jar. Ah, yes. Another fresh delivery. You're back in the Fullonica before sunrise. Because Tadura, on collection duty. If stomping togas in warm pea wasn't glamorous enough, now you get to see where the magic starts. The streets of Rome, collecting that precious golden liquid straight from the source. Not exactly from the source, more like from the pots placed near the source. Your job, retrieve the filled urine containers from around the city and bring them back to the laundry. Most Fullonica have designated routes, and you've been assigned the Lower Forum District Tan area, notorious for strong wine, weak bladders, and very talkative tavern owners. You hoist the first jar. It's surprisingly heavy. You try not to imagine the journey it's taken to get here. Your coworkers joke that you can tell what someone ate by the smell of their donation. You hope they're wrong. You're not ready for that level of intimacy with strangers. Mainstream fact. Public urinals in Rome weren't just for convenience, they were strategic. The Romans set them up near markets, theaters, and busy roads. These phallones were often built into walls or placed at corners where foot traffic was high. And they weren't hidden away, they were part of the city's landscape. But who emptied them? That'd be you. Or someone like you. Often, the dirtiest jobs in the Fullonica Rotatador were assigned to apprentices and slaves. If you were low in rank or new to the job, you got the worst duties. Guess where you rank today? Your quirky tidbit. Some citizens were paid to fill the pots. Yes, people who lived near collection points sometimes made deals with foolers. Keep the jars full, and you'll get a small coin for your contribution. Which means that in some Roman neighborhoods, pee was literally a side hustle. You reach the third jar and gag. This one had clearly been sitting longer. The top is crusted, and there's something growing on the rim. You try to lift it but slip slightly. A few drops slosh out and land on your sandal. You exhale deeply, set your dignity aside, and keep walking. You pass a small boy perched on a step, watching you with morbid curiosity. Is that for wine? He asks with a grin. Only if you're cursed, you reply. And he laughs like it's the funniest thing he's heard all day. Historians still argue about how organized the collection system really was. Some say it was an informal network of workers and local deals. Others believe there was a municipal system, in plus especially after Emperor Vespasian's famous pea tax. What's clear is that it was valuable enough for people to fight over access and control. Speaking of Vespasian, you pass one of the stone urinals nicknamed Vesp. Supposedly, the emperor's name became slang for pea pots themselves. You pause, glance inside, and see it's nearly full. Great. One more jar to carry. As you return to the Fullonica, your arms aching, your tunic sticking to your back, and your nose numb to all but the strongest smells, you realize something shocking. You've just walked through the heart of the city carrying a dozen jars of human waste, and no one batted an eye. This is Rome. Laundry is an empire-wide operation, and you're just another cog in the smelly Back inside, the jars are poured into the main soaking vat. You watch the golden streams swell together, steaming slightly in the early heat. Lucius claps you on the back too hard and says, "Now that's the good stuff." You nod. You still want to vomit. But there's a strange pride here too. You did your job. You powered the next round of cleansing. And as weird as it sounds, the city's clean togas wouldn't exist without you. So you grab a bowl of barley gruel, sit in the corner, and try not to think about where your fingers have been. Because in ancient Rome, it takes a city to wash a toga and a lot of pee to make it shine. By now, your sense of smell has either completely shut down or achieved spiritual transcendence. And somehow, despite the vats, the filth, and the foot fungus lurking in the shadows, you're starting to see the Fullonica as a place of accidental genius. Because here's the secret no one tells you on your first day. Roman foolers were chemical wizards without even knowing it. Today, you're assigned to the mixing station. This is where ingredients are blended into that magical, horrendous brew that somehow revives togas from the dead. Your job: combine a fresh jar of urine with fuller's earth, crushed pumice, and surprise fermented fig juice. Yes, fig juice. For fragrance, supposedly. But right now it smells like spoiled ambition. You stir the vat with a long wooden paddle, watching the frothy mixture swirl like a primordial soup. And here's the kicker. This isn't just old-world superstition. Modern chemists have analyzed the remnants from Roman Fullonica and confirmed that these mixes worked. They understood pH balance, alkaline reactions, even protein breakdowns. Mainstream fact. Ammonia in urine breaks down organic materials: sweat, oils, dirt. Fuller's earth absorbs grease and particles. Pumice adds gentle abrasion. When combined in the right proportions, these materials rival mild modern It's not exactly Tide Pods, but it got the job done. And here's your quirky twist. Some foolers experimented with sulfur fumes. That's right, they'd hang garments in closed chambers and burn sulfur to whiten them, which also probably shortened everyone's lifespan by 10 years. But hey, white robes. You glance at Unia as she pinches her nose and tosses in a handful of ashes. It's all about timing, she says, as if you're baking cookies instead of creating a medieval chemical reaction. Historians still argue whether foolers discovered these techniques intentionally or by happy accident. Was it generational wisdom passed through apprenticeship? Or did someone one day say, "Hey, what if we set this on fire?" No one knows for sure. What's clear is that trial and error turned into Back at your workstation, you test the mixture on a particularly gnarly tunic. It belonged to a fishmonger and smells like Poseidon's regret. You soak it in the solution, knead it with your hands, and wait. 10 minutes later, you rinse it in fresh water, and it's cleaner. Not perfect, but visibly improved. The smell? Well, it no longer peels paint off walls. So that's progress. And then there's the drying process. You learn to position garments just so angled into the sun, brushed with chalk, gently beaten with flat wooden paddles to soften the wool. It's choreography, a silent, smelly ballet of chemistry and patience. Unia joins you, humming a song with no words, and shows you a trick. Brushing a few drops of vinegar over stubborn stains before sun exposure helps lift them out. Makes it pop, she says, pointing at a wine blotch disappearing before your eyes. You stare? She winks. We're basically so. You laugh. Not because she's wrong, but because you realize this profession, this nasty, overlooked trade is built on thousands of these micro-discoveries. It's innovation. You take a moment to look around the Fullonica with new eyes. Every station is its own experiment. Every vat a bubbling reaction. Every stomp a form of agitation. You're living inside an ancient laboratory where success is measured in brightness and stink reduction. Even the tools make more sense now. The paddles, brushes, combs there, not random sticks. They're specialized instruments. And the workers, they're technicians in tunics, covered in grime, sure, but highly trained. You pause as a boy runs in with an emergency delivery of blood-streaked toga. Temple robe, ritual accident, needs to be cleaned today. Without missing a beat, Lucius grabs the fresh fig solution, adds warm water, sprinkles in sea salt, and gives you a nod. Let's make some magic. So you do. You mix. You scrub. You whisper a prayer to Mercury, and maybe to modern science. And when the robe comes out pale pink, instead of blood-stained white, no one panics. You just add a layer of crushed chalk and call it sunset ceremonial. That's how foolers roll. By the end of the day, you're exhausted but not disheartened, because while the job may be disgusting, the results are weirdly satisfying. You're part of a forgotten lineage of chemical improvisers, and somewhere, deep in your ammonia-soaked brain, you think, you'd rather do this than fold fitted sheets. The day begins with the Fullonica already in full swing, bats steaming, clay dust thick in the air, and a man somewhere gagging quietly behind a pillar. you barely notice anymore. Your nose has surrendered. But today, your task shifts to something much more intimate and arguably more horrifying. You're in the sensory zone now. This is the part of the Fullonica where judgment is king. Your job isn't to stomp or scrub. It's to assess. That's right, you're using your eyes, your fingers, and most unfortunately, your nose, to determine whether a garment is clean enough. You lift a damp tunic to the light. The sun hits the fabric, revealing ghostly outlines of old stains. Grease along the hem, sweat around the collar, a splash of something yellow-green you'd rather not label. You bring it closer to your face and inhale lightly, cautiously, like it's a venomous flower. Not terrible, but not ready for the senator's banquet either. Mainstream fact. Ancient Roman foolers didn't just clean clothes, they evaluated them. Every piece had to pass the smell test. Sometimes, literally. If a garment still reeked after processing, it went right back into the vat. And since repeat customers included priests, senators, and rich matrons, one foul whiff could ruin your shop's reputation. It's the original quality control department, no machines, just noses. And that brings you to the infamous reek rack, where rejected garments hang limply like damp regrets. You sort through them, trying to guess what went wrong. Too short, a soak, wrong mix of clay and ash, poor sun-drying technique. Junior joins you, holding a towel with tweezers. This one's haunted, tossing it into the reject bin with the flair of someone who smelled too much in one lifetime. Here's your quirky tidbit. Foolers sometimes used perfume or herbal infusions to mask lingering odors, not always successfully. In fact, one of the most bizarre Roman cleaning hacks involved rubbing a mix of rosemary vinegar and goat milk into garments after washing, hoping it would neutralize the spirit of the filth. They didn't have they had vibes. The worst part of this station, you begin to recognize clients by scent. The merchant who always brings clothes that smell faintly of fish and incense. The young noble whose tunics reek of wine and desperation. The old priest with a robe that smells like old scrolls and holy sweat. Your nose becomes a filing system. Historians still argue whether Roman foolers had written guidelines for this part of the job. Some suggest they followed oral tradition, while others believe each shop made up its own rules. Either way, your success hinges on senses. No one should ever use this thoroughly. And then comes the worst offender. You open a bundle delivered from the outer district and immediately the scent is so sharp, so offensive, it feels like a personal attack. Lucius walks by, sniffs once, and turns on his heel without a word. Unia hands you a scarf to tie over your mouth. You unravel the garment slowly. It's not even a tunic, it's a cloak, heavy with grime, stiff with age. The color might once have been brown. Now it's a suspicious greenish black, as if it's plotting something. You look to the vat. You look at your hands. You look at the sun and briefly consider quitting, moving to Gaul, and becoming a beet farmer. But you don't. You heave the cloak into a retreatment barrel and begin again. New mix. Longer soak. This one might take all day, and probably all your soul. While you work, a client arrives, a woman draped in a pale blue. She nods toward a folded pile and says, "Mine." You check the tag. Yes. Her tunic's passed the test. You hand her the bundle. She lifts it to her nose, breathes in, and smiles. "Fresh," she says. You feel a strange surge of pride, because no one will ever cheer for you in the forum. No poet will sing of the man who restored a toga's dignity. But for one moment, someone noticed. Someone appreciated the hours you spent scrubbing, stomping, and that's enough. You'll return to the reek rack. Take a deep breath, not of the garments. Allah help you, aunt. Get back to work. Because in the Roman world, cleanness wasn't just about hygiene. It was about honor. And you're the keeper of it, one laundry load at a time. You're hauling baskets again. Your tunic sticking to your back. Arms trembling from repetition. When you hear something different, customer voices. The front entrance of the Fullonica is open wide, letting in the clatter of sandals, a whiff of street food, and the unmistakable sound of someone arguing over a delivery at a leg. You recognize the voice. It's Publius, a pompous wine merchant whose toga smells like grape regret and always arrives late. Welcome to the business side of Roman laundry. Today, you're not stomping. You're schmoozing, or at least pretending to. You're shadowing the overseer, who manages not just the workers, but the logistics. Because a Fullonica isn't just a smelly factory, it's a money-making machine. Mainstream fact. Roman foolers weren't just laborers, they were The Fullonica was a commercial operation, complete with inventory records, price negotiations, and customer lists. Larger establishments could process dozens, even hundreds, of garments per day, and not all clients paid in coin. Some traded goods, others bartered favors. A few owed debts that the Fuller happily tallied in a wax tablet ledger. You sit in a corner, recording transactions as Unya hagles with a customer over excessive wrinkling. She argues that the wrinkles came with the tunic. The client insists they didn't. He eventually concedes, after she offers a free spot treatment with vinegar and prayer. That's the art of the ups. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Fullers stamp their names on garments with a red dye, much like modern dry cleaners use tags. This wasn't always appreciated, especially if the client was high. Imagine getting your robe back with Marcus did this stamped across the hem. Back to business. You notice something else, a division of labor. Some Fullonica employed slaves, others free workers, and some a mix of both. Status inside the building varied just as wildly as it did outside. Skilled Fullers who knew how to treat expensive dyes were prized. Others who only stirred the vat, less so. Historians still argue about how profitable Fullers could become. Some inscriptions suggest a few grew wealthy, even influential. One Fuller in Pompeii, Stephanus, had his name etched above his shop's entrance. That's brand awareness. You help sort incoming orders. Most are basic tunics, cheap linen, basic wool, Lauresque stains. Then you see it. A crimson cloak, dyed with imported madar root, or, worse, Tyrian purple. This garment is expensive. One wrong move and you'll be chased through the forum by a guy with a lot of rings on his fingers. Your overseer leans in. This one's a repeat client. Pays well. Complains more. You take the cloak and bring it to the no-soak zone, where her value garments are hand-washed only, using mild ingredients and whisper soft brushing. It's a delicate dance. More massage than cleaning. You treat it with reverence, aware that its owner probably bathes more often than you do. Later, while folding garments for delivery, you overhear a quiet transaction, Lucius slipping an extra coin to a messenger for a side job. Not all deals happen above board. Some Fullers wash private robes after hours. Others clean garments, not meant to be seen, lovers, tunics, soiled ritual robes, even stolen items. The Fullonica isn't just a place of labor. It's a hub. Information, gossip, secret stay, all soak in, just like the sweat from those tunics. A temple priest stops by to request emergency laundering. You don't ask what happened. You don't want to ask, but you light the sulfur pot and nod respectfully. By late afternoon, the coin box is fuller than usual. You helped seal 2 new clients. You folded over 50 garments. You saw a bribe and a blessing, all before sunset. You wash your hands in a barrel of gray water that smells like old lemons and regret, and wipe them on your tunic without thinking. You're not just muscle anymore. You're part of the machine. And while you may still go home reeking of foot wash and fig acid, tonight you've also got 2 fresh coins in your pocket. One for food, one for wine. Both earned by turning stink into status. You're back in the dye corner now. And let's be honest, this pot actually looks beautiful. Large ceramic pots filled with vibrant colors line the edge of the courtyard. Deep indigos, rusty reds, dusky yellows, and even a few rare purples shimmer in the light like bowls of melted sunset. The smell isn't much better than anywhere else. Think vinegar and fermented roots, but at least it's not warm pee. Today, you're learning the Roman art of recoloring garments. Because laundry wasn't just about cleaning, it was about Sometimes, a client brought a tunic so stained, so hopeless, that instead of fighting the Fullers embraced them with dye. A muddy white tunic becomes a rich saffron robe. A faded toga turns into a charcoal gray cloak. It's practical, it's fashion, it's ancient damage control. Mainstream fact: Romans loved dyed clothing. Certain colors held strong, meaning purple was reserved for emperors and top officials, while black often signified mourning or seriousness. Red was popular with soldiers and performers, while yellow showed up in women's ceremonial garb. But achieving those colors, not easy, not cheap. You're stirring a dye bath, made from madar root. It smells earthy, almost spicy. Unia warns you not to splash it, it stains skin for days. You lower a tunic into the vat slowly, careful not to fold it or leave streaks. Timing matters. Agitation matters. Too much movement and the color splotches. Too little and it fades. Quirky tidbit: some Roman recipes involved soaking fabrics in cow urine before dyeing. Why? It helped fix the color. The ammonia prepared the wool to absorb pigment more evenly. You try not to think about it as you step. Your hands are already permanently tinted pink. Anyway, you glanced over at the purple station, locked behind a wooden barrier. That's where the rarest Deuterian purple is kept. It's made from the mucus of sea snails, requires thousands of them for just a small batch, and smells like low tide plus doom. Only the wealthiest clients can afford it, and only the most skilled foolers are allowed to touch it. You, of course, are not one of them. Historians still debate how widely available certain dyes were. Some argue that colored garments were more common than previously believed, especially among the merchant class. Others insist that true, rich hues remain symbols of power and privilege. Either way, you know one thing for sure: miss up a dye job, and you're going to need a new job. You finish soaking the tunic and pull it out. It's glowing a beautiful burnt orange that looks like something a senator's wife might wear to a religious festival. You rinse it carefully, hang it to dry in a shadowed spot, and watch the droplets fall like honey from the edge. While working, you learn a few other tricks. Mix iron with oak gold to make a deep black. Use fermented pomegranate for a dusty yellow. Throw in a handful of crushed beetles for extra shine. You wish you were kidding about that last one. And then there's the deception. Some foolers, especially in the rougher districts, cheat. They dilute expensive dyes, mix in clay to add weight, or apply surface-only color that washes out after a week. One of your co-workers jokes, "It only has to last until the party's over." You don't laugh. You're starting to take this job personally. Near sunset, a high-status client arrives with a very specific request. Recolor her faded tunic to match the shade of wine served at her upcoming banquet. You nod solemnly, even though that shade of wine depends heavily on the vintage and the angle of the sun. Still, you mix crushed madar root, red ochre, and a dash of old vinegar. Stir until your arms ache, and dip the garment in. When it dries, the color is rich, elegant, bold. You smile. She won't notice the vinegar scent. Probably. As the dye corner closes for the day, you wash your hands in a bucket that now looks like a failed watercolor palette. Your nails are stained red, your arms flecked with yellow and black, but your heart's a little lighter, because today, you didn't just clean clothes, you transformed them. And for a moment, under the orange sky, with your hands dipped in color and wool flapping behind you in the breeze, you don't feel like a fooler, you feel like an artist. You're wiping down a stone bench when someone whispers, "Don't touch that one. It's cursed." You blink. Unia nods, seriously, toward a bundled tunic tied with black thread. It's not a color-coding thing, it's a superstition. Welcome to the weird, sacred, and slightly spooky side of Roman laundry. Because as it turns out, clothes weren't just fabric. They were emotional objects, spiritual ones, and sometimes dangerous ones. That tunic, it belonged to a woman accused of sorcery. Her neighbor swore she put a curse on his olives, and now she's sent her garments in to be cleaned like nothing happened. You're not superstitious, but even you hesitate to untie the thread. Mainstream fact. Romans believed in miasma, or spiritual pollution. Touching certain objects, especially those linked to death, illness, or the gods, could taint you. Garments worn during funerals, sacrifices, or in temples had to be purified in special ways. Foolers often took on the burden of cleaning not just the dirt, but the spiritual residue. This is where laundry meets ritual. You're shown to the consecration zone, a small corner of the Fullonica, walled off and decorated with faded chalk symbols. Here, garments were laid out and sprinkled with salted water, sometimes waved over incense or doused in wine. And yes, someone had to whisper prayers to the household gods while doing it. Guess who gets picked today? You stand over the bundle, salt in hand, muttering a clumsy phrase Unia taught you. May the stain leave cloth and soul alike. It sounds better in Latin. You hope the gods are in a forgiving mood. Quirky tidbit. Some foolers used amulets or wore protective charms while working, especially when laundering garments from unknown origins. One ancient laundry worker supposedly stitched a tiny bronze snake into his tunic hem to ward off evil spirits. Whether it worked or just terrified rats, no one knows. As you gently unwrap the cursed tunic, you realize it's not even that dirty. A few streaks of candle wax, some dark marks along the hem charcoal, or you'd rather not guess. Still, you follow procedure. Light rinse, saltwater scrub, hanging it beneath the shrine of Mercury, the patron of merchants and, apparently, laundry workers with cursed customers. Historians still argue whether these rituals were formalized or more like local traditions. In big cities like Rome and Alexandria, Laundry shops may have followed set guidelines, but in smaller towns, it was a blend of religion, rumor, and whoever had the best ghost story. You're handed a different bundle. Next, this one wrapped in pure white cloth. Temple robes, says Lucian. Treat them like you're washing Jupiter's underwear. No pressure. You soak them gently in water mixed with rose petals and river sand. No ash, no urine. Just cleansing herbs and soft brushes. The fabric is delicate, and the scent is oddly calming. You feel like you're handling something holy, which, in a way, you are. Later, a man drops off a funeral shroud. He doesn't say much, just nods and slides to extra coins across the counter. The message is clear. Make it spotless. Not just for the eyes of Rome, but for the afterlife. You begin to understand the Fuller's deeper role. You're not just preparing someone for a feast, or for politics. You're preparing them for judgments from mortals, or from gods. And then comes the strangest task of the day. An elderly woman arrives with a blood-stained garment and a very quiet voice. It's from childbirth, she says. It must be cleaned and buried. You nod solemnly. In Roman culture, childbirth was both sacred and dangerous, full of omens and risk. Cleaning the garment becomes a moment of silence. You scrub with lavender, rinsed with wine, and dry it alone, away from the others. You don't crack jokes. You don't hum. You just clean. By the end of the day, the cursed tunic is folded and returned. The temple robes are glowing with ritual brightness, and the bloodied cloth is sealed in white linen and passed gently back to its owner. You wash your hands in salt water, light a stick of incense, and let the smoke curl around your face. Because laundry, in this world, is more than dirt and stink. It's ceremony, it's memory, it's belief stitched into every fold. You've heard stories about Pompeii city frozen in time, preserved under ash like a Roman snow globe, but what no one tells you is how loud it must have been when it lived. Today, you're walking through the ruins of an actual Fullonica, a real one, uncovered centuries after it was buried beneath the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 CE. And as you move between crumbling stone basins and faded, the silence is eerie. You could almost hear the slosh of water, the splash of feet, the barked instructions of an overseer long gone. It's surreal. You're standing in the footprint of an ancient laundry shop, and everything suddenly feels incredibly real. Mainstream fact. Archaeologists have uncovered multiple Fullonica in Pompeii, some of them quite large. The most famous, the Fullonica of Stephanus, includes at least 5 large soaking vats, a stone-paved work area, a water tower, and even an upstairs living space. It wasn't just a shop. It was a small industrial complex. You picture yourself back in time, sloshing through those vats, scrubbing a tunic while volcanic tremors rumble in the distance. It gives you chills, and not just because the stones are cold under your sandal. There's a mural on one wall, faded, but still visible. It shows 2 men stomping fabric in a vat, arms raised mid. Above them, a Roman god watches, probably Mercury again, the patron of merchants. The artwork isn't grand, it's functional. An illustrated how-to guide for future workers. Ancient instructional signage. Quirky tidbit. Graffiti scratched into one wall near the Fullonica reads, "Felix was here. He cleaned better than you." A timeless jab from one laundry worker to another. It seems workplace SAS predates employee break rooms by at least 2 millennia. You step over a groove in the floor, one worn by years of stomping feet. The stone has literally sunk in some places from the constant repetition. Think about that. The sheer volume of togas, tunics, and cloaks that pass through here. The gallons of urine poured. The miles of wool flattened. You're standing in the results of centuries of squelching, scrubbing, and sun. Historians still argue whether the Fullonica of Pompeii were representative of larger Roman cities, or a uniquely advanced outpost. Some suggest that Pompeii's launderers were unusually organized and prosperous due to the city's wealth and location near trade routes. Others believe Fullonica dislodged and advanced were common across the empire. The debate continues. You pause at what looks like a communal toilet. Nope, not a toilet. A public urinal. Pee collection was essential, after all. You imagine the process. Residents donating their contributions. Fullers hauling them in buckets, pouring them into vats where the miracle cleaning began. The genius of it all isn't just in the chemistry, it's in the infrastructure. The Romans built a city around laundry pipes, drains, urinals, soak zones, drying areas. It was disgusting. It was brilliant. It was efficient. You peek into what remains of the drying yard. The walls are high, angled to let in sun but protect from wind. Small holes along the perimeter probably held wooden posts or ropes clotheslines. It's all still there, if you know how to see it. And for a moment, the silence breaks. You can almost hear it. Again, the splash of water, the hum of a work song, the thud of soaked cloth hitting stone, the clink of coins, the complaint of a customer, the laughter after a crude joke. Life, full, sweaty, smelly, before ash buried it all in an instant. You step out into the street, blinking in the daylight. Modern tourists pass by, unaware that they're walking past what was once the beating heart of hygiene and social class. You know better now. You know what these people did, how they lived, how they laundered, and as you walk away from the ruins, hands clasped behind your back like a philosopher, you realize something unexpected. You miss it. You're back at the Fullonica now, hands crusted with clay again. When the overseer claps loudly and shouts, "New rule charge double on palace orders," you blink. You ask. He grins. The Emperor's men are in town. They need the good stuff. And just like that, you're part of imperial economics. Because today's lesson is about something truly bizarre, even by Roman standards. The Emperor taxed GOP. Mainstream fact. In the 1st century CE, Emperor Vespasian introduced the urine tax, a levy placed on collectors of urine from public latrines. Why? Because it had value. Foolers like you used it every day. And the Emperor, ever the pragmatic ruler, saw an opportunity. If there was money to be made from pee, then the state should get a cut. You're suddenly aware that every bucket you haul, every vat you stir, every splash that lands on your sandal is technically part of the Roman economy. And here's your quirky tidbit. Vespasian's son, Titus, apparently scoffed at the tax, finding it revolting. Vespasian famously held a coin up to his son's nose and said, "Pecunia non olet." Money doesn't stink. It became a catchphrase across the empire. And honestly, it's still true. Even the stinkiest laundry brings in silver. You're working the intake counter today, sorting tunics and cloaks into priority piles. High-paying clients first, soldiers second, temple staff next, and then everyone else beasons and the guy who only pays with old fish and good stories. A messenger arrives with a sealed order from the Praetorian Guard, the Emperor's personal bodyguards. Their cloaks are soaked in sweat, grime, and what is that? Garlic? You don't ask. You just get to work. This job gets special treatment: double-sifted clay, freshest spoolers earth, filtered urines. They actually pass it through linen first to remove sediment. It's disgusting and meticulous, like making fine wine. If the wine had marinated in someone's sandals for a week, historians still debate how the Vatigal urinatho urine tax was implemented. Did collectors pay up front? Was it taxed per jar? Did foolish share the burden? Or was it passed entirely to suppliers? The records are fuzzy. What's clear is that this humble substance became a taxable asset under the Roman state. You sigh as you lift another imperial tunic into a custom vat. It's got gold thread, special embroidery, probably ceremonial. You don't scrub these too hard, they're mostly for show. Appearances, after all, matter more than cleanliness when you're surrounded by marble columns and loyal senators. Lucius leans in and whispers, "You think they'd pay us extra for scrubbing their underpants?" You snort. Probably not. After rinsing and drying, you iron the garments with smooth, heated stones, wrap them in fresh linen, and place them in a wooden chest with cedar chips to keep pests away, especially when your client carries a sword and can legally impale you. Later, the tax collector arrives. He doesn't wear armor, but he's just as dangerous. He strolls in, nods at the overseer, and writes something in a wax tablet. "For extra vats this week," he says flatly. "Taxed accordingly." The overseer groans and pays up. You glance at the coin he hands over. It's slightly sticky. You pretend not to notice. Here's the irony, working harder than ever, processing more orders than you can count, but the shop's profit margin shrinks every time that taxman walks in. You wonder, how many tunics does it take to pay a urine bill? Still, you do your job. Because clients keep showing up, foolers like you remain indispensable. You're part of the city's circulatory system, moving fabric, sweat, and silver from one corner of Rome to another. At the end of the day, you collapse onto a bench with a bowl of lentils and a sore back. Unia sits beside you and says, "They may tax the pea, but they can't tax our pride." You raise your spoon in salute, because even under the Emperor's nose, literally, you've made something rank into something respectable. And no matter how badly it stinks, money still doesn't. By now, you've seen it. All urine buckets, ghost-stained tunics, senators' and sacred robes that needed more prayer than soap. But today, your shift ends with something oddly peaceful. You're in the drying yard. The heat of the day is gone, replaced by a soft evening breeze. The sun is low, and the sky above the Fullonica has turned a dusty orange. Dozens of freshly washed garments flap gently on long hemp cords stretched between stone posts. The air smells faintly of vinegar and lavender. And finally, after hours of stomping, scrubbing, rinsing, and wringing, you get to stand still. This is the final step. Mainstream fact. Ancient fullers took drying seriously. Wool garments needed airflow to avoid stiffening. Colors had to be shaded from direct light. Tunics were shaken out to avoid wrinkles, then patted with flat stones to maintain shape. The drying yard wasn't just a packing lot for wet clothes, it was a crafting station. You moved through the rows, feeling fabric between your fingers, checking for moisture. Some are already crisp and ready to fold. Others still drip faintly, casting a rhythmic tap-tap onto the stone floor. It's oddly soothing. Quirky tidbit. Some Romans believed the best time to dry ceremonial garments was during the full moon. Something about lunar purity, or the favor of Diana, goddess of the hunt and moonlight. Did it work? Who knows? But if a client asked for it, you did it, no questions asked. You helped Unia fold the crimson cloak that was once stained beyond saving. Now, it cleans. You think back to the first time you saw it, splotchy, sour-smelling, stiff as bark. And now, it looks like something a patrician might wear to a wedding. Historians still debate how much effort went into presentation. Some believe fullers simply piled garments once dry. Others argued that folding, scenting, and packaging were all part of the service, especially for high-ranking clients. Given the tidy bundles stacked at the counter, you'd bet on the latter. You hum a tune, one you once stomped to in the vat. Unia joins in. The sun dips lower, shadows lengthen, and the yard begins to glow gold. A customer arrives late just before closing. It's the merchant who always tipped in olives. He's smiling, holding a basket. For the best launderers in Rome, he says, offering you a jar of pickled figs and a wink. You don't even hate it this time. You hand him his bundle. He lifts it, smells it, nods in approval. Crisp, he says. You lot could clean Hades' laundry. You laugh, and then, without thinking, you add, as long as he pays up front. Everyone laughs. Even Lucius, even the overseer. As the last garment is taken down and the drying cords are coiled for the night, you stand in the middle of the yard, surrounded by silence. No splashing, no stomping, no shouting about stain ratios or vinegar prices. Just air. Your arms are sore. Your nails are black. Your feet are still faintly damp from a mishap with the senator's bathrobe. But you've made it through another day. Another pile of garments restored, reputations salvaged, stains erased. And as you sit down on the warm stone bench and close your eyes, your thoughts drift. You think about how absurd it is to measure a day in tunics, but also how strangely satisfying it is. And as your breathing slows, you let the last traces of steam and sweat fade into the dusk. Because tomorrow, you rinse, you repeat, you survive. The Fullonica fades now, the clatter, the heat, the stomp of bare feet in shallow vats, all slipping quietly into the past. You're no longer holding damp tunics or hauling ceramic jars through crowded Roman alleys. No more nose-wrinkling buckets. No shouting overseers. No whispered curses about cursed robes. Just the hush of twilight and the soft creak of drying cords swaying gently in the evening air. You sit in the courtyard where the sun has long set. The stones beneath you are still warm. And overhead, a few stars begin to blink into viewfront, distant and calm. Someone laughs softly in the distance. A lute plays somewhere down the street. A quiet, meandering tune without urgency. Everything slows. You close your eyes and picture the wool cloak you just folded creased, perfectly, scented with lavender, packed with care. The day's chaos has settled into something still, something finished. The smell of ammonia is gone now. Only the memory remains, softened at the edges, drifting like steam through your thoughts. And with each breath, you let go a little more. The aches in your arms dissolve. The blisters on your feet are forgotten. Even the endless swirl of voices from earlier clients, co-workers. You're unquiet, until there's only one left. Yours. You did your part. You scrubbed and stomped, folded and fought, laughed and endured. And now, you rest. The laundry will still be there tomorrow. But for tonight, you are clean. You are still. You are done.